and welcome to the early edition of this week's Title Tuesday. I am Women International Master Anna-Maja Kazarian and I'm your host of today's show. I hope you all are very excited. As you may have heard, everybody, Title Tuesday is happening from now on twice a week. So that means that everyone around the world is able to participate at least once in Title Tuesday, which is amazing, of course. Before we jump into the games, everyone, let me show you what the prizes are, because we have a prize fund of $2,500. The first place is going home with $1,000, and we have prizes for the rest of the top 5 as well as the top women player and the top streamer. The format of this event is an 11-round Swiss tournament with a time control of 3 minutes and a 1-second increment. And the payout is based on Chesscom tie breaks. For more information, go to go.chess.com/TitleTuesday. Now, let's have a look, everyone. Who do you think is gonna win today's event? Let's have a look at who's playing. We see that Bogdan Diac is playing Fair Chess on YouTube. I believe that's Dimitri Andreikin. We have Jan Nepomniachtchi playing, as well as Grishuk. I see Min as well. I see Mishanik. So that's a lot of top players playing, and the games have started. Let's have a look who is playing against each other. Let's jump to the board 1, everyone. Let's jump to board 1. We see 1b3 being played. All right. That's Adivan's favorite opening. The bishop is being traded for the knight, which damages the structure. Let me flip the board, by the way. Let me flip the board. So the pawn structure is a bit damaged of black here, but in return, black does have the pair of bishops. Now, that we have to see in a couple of moves as the position will develop. We'll have to see how things continue. So black goes for d4 here, and if white trades, obviously the pawn structure will be a bit improved for black, which is why white doesn't take. But at the same time, this pawn blocks his bishop on b2, so that's really nice for black, and it allows black to develop much better. All right, hd is being played here, and black decides to take that knight. It's a very interesting decision, because the only thing they had for this weakness here, the weaknesses here in the center, was the pair of bishops. So now without the pair of bishops, you don't really have like much compensation. But on the other hand, it's not like white has a lot of play here. This bishop on b2 is kind of stuck. The knight on b1 is not developed yet, and we'll have to see where white develops. They probably should go kingside castle here. All right. Black goes for e5, trying to strengthen the position of that pawn. Okay, so far so good. Let's jump to another game. In the meantime, let's see. Let's go to board 2. We see... Oh, give me a second. Okay. Give me a second. There we go. Okay, we see Slovak fighter against Fair Chess on YouTube. All right, what is going on in this position? We see a bishop on g7, but it's not doing much because it's just looking at the pawn on d4, and that's why black is trying to prepare c5. But okay, you have a problem here on d5. You need to defend that pawn still. So black goes knight c4. What is black's idea here? It would be ideal to have a queenside attack here, but it's not so clear how you can start one. Maybe you can start considering pushing that pawn on the queen side. But it weakens a lot of squares, so you have to be careful with that. And there we go, b5 has been played. Now, how does white respond to this? I feel like one of the best ways to deal with this is either take on d5, trying to open the position, or rather close the position, especially of that bishop on g7. In fact, white goes for b3, trying to get rid of that knight over here, but the knight doesn't go away that easily. Knight goes to a3, gives a check. Now the king is on b2. Now this knight looks a little bit odd here on the edge of the board, but it does cover a lot of squares here. The king can go to b1 or c2. And yeah, white will always be vulnerable if this pawn decides to move and if it disappears, because then the rook will become very active on the c file. And there we go. Wow. I think I am guessing Black's plans here very well. I'm very proud to see that. But yeah, Fair Chess on YouTube is in fact following my plans here. And let's see if it pays off. Knight takes c4, check. Now the c file is opened. But he also opens the e file, which allows it rook trades. And I'm not sure for who that's better, because on one hand, you would say that if you trade off the rooks and there's less pieces that you have to attack with. But on the other hand, there's a lot of weaknesses here around here in the white's position. So if you traded the rooks away, then there is a lot of weaknesses still in the position. And the queen could make use of that, the black queen. So Slovak fighter spent some time and plays g4. Interesting move. Perhaps they didn't like the rook trade for the reason that I mentioned, but they also probably didn't want to allow g4, kicking the knight out of this decent square. Rook e4 has been played. Wow. Okay. Allowing white to capture here. Is it some sort of... I was thinking maybe there is some queen takes f3, but maybe that's a bit too much and not achieving that much. And knight a3 is just crushing it. King a1, and now you have knight c2, just winning that exchange, and slowly but surely the game as well. Let's have a look at another game. This one seems to be decided already, or it's gonna be decided very soon. Let's jump to the game of Bazar Vokzal against Grishuk. Okay, so white's king here is in the center. I'm not sure what happened here with white's development, but it doesn't look very good. The knight got to f2. It's kind of a cute setup, but sadly, this is not how you want to play chess, because the rooks are not connected. They're not on open files. This is the best they could get. And yeah, there's I was going to say very little counterplay, but I think we can downgrade that to no counterplay, because you don't have any sort of play. Even if you, like, you can think of some pawn push here, but even then, like, your king is very, very vulnerable, and I wouldn't be so sure how to save your king here. White is in time trouble now as well, down to 15 seconds, king d1. And now d3, and black is making use of the fact that the queen and the king are lined up with the rook here on the d file. So if you open up that d file, then you just win the queen. So that is a resignation, and what a crushing game it feels like of Grishuk. Let's see who's still playing here. We have Jan against Ural Bokatir. Oh, that is a resignation, because indeed rook takes a7, and there's too many pawns here. It's very easy to convert that for white. Who's still playing? Let's have a look. We see Min is still playing. Rook g4, preparing the trap of queen takes h6, but black doesn't care because there are bigger problems here. One of them being checkmate. So that is a very nice win of Min there, even though we only saw the game briefly. There's still a couple of games being in progress right now. Bortnik is playing against Tactic. Very cool username. And wow, checkmate in the middle of the board in an endgame. Well, you can consider this an endgame. There's barely any pieces left. But that is a very beautiful checkmate. I wonder if a move earlier... Okay, so because of the fact that this king is in big trouble, we don't care about this pawn on b2. You know, if it can't move, if it can't queen, if it doesn't cover anything, it won't help your king. It won't help your king, and that's why white was able to win this. Let's see, who's still playing? Okay, we see Denlaz against MF Berna. Both really strong players. Sadly, I do not recognize the names, but they seem really strong. And ooh, black is promoting here, winning all the pieces, and that should be resignation. Yep. Ooh, that seems like a big upset, actually. The player with the white pieces was 2900 rated, so it seems like a big upset. Okay, do we still have games going on? We have a lot of games going on. We have Jose against Chess Queen, and Chess Queen won this game. Okay, good stuff. Let's go on. We still have a bunch of games going on. It's the first round, and it's kind of funny to see. Oh, that was a free rook. And I don't think we're gonna see a stalemate. I don't think so. I don't think so. I know there's a lot of... Oh, okay, that was a stalemate setup, but you just give a check. You just give a check and make sure that there's no stalemate. This all seems like an upset. Wow. A lot of upset already in the first round. Let's see what is happening in this one. This seems to be winning for black, but there are chances here of like a perpetual. There are chances of that. When you're in a queen endgame, it's pretty easy to fall into like a perpetual. Like suddenly the king can't escape all the checks. And that is really unfortunate. And what's also really unfortunate is that it's hard for black to find progress here. But black is trying their best to make progress here. But I wouldn't be so sure at this. Oh, you're tied to the queen. You're tied to the queen. This is exactly what I was talking about. What? I don't know what I just witnessed. This seemed, it was already crazy enough that we were seeing a repetition there. Not even a repetition, a perpetual. But the fact that Queen C3 was being played. So hold up, Queen. So the problem here is that White thought the king is going back to E3. I play Queen C3 check, repetition, GG. But Queen C3 check, the queen was covering that square, and black completely didn't. Actually, black made the only move that's losing in this position. That is quite impressive. That is quite impressive. All right, well, what a firework we saw in the first round, everybody. We are moving on to round 2. Let's see. Let's see how Woven Rogel is playing from Belgium. Okay. We are in the... This was from the Queen's Gambit, everybody. Knight g5. Do you want to take that bishop? I like trading bishops with my knight, but I'm not sure if I like that bishop. I think the bishop is great over there. Okay, black decides to take the white bishop on f4. Now you do have this pawn on f4, and it is kind of interesting because on one hand you might be like, okay, this pawn structure, not the greatest, but look how many squares this pawn is covering. The square on e5, f5 is a possibility, g5 is well defended. It can be really, really interesting. And especially the square on e5, that is very important to white. Those squares are one of the main squares in this variation, in this pawn structure. And that's why the knight goes to a4, trying to exploit those squares. Knight c5, knight b6 are ideas. And we see a rook trade on the board, but I do feel like this rook trade benefits white, because when there are less pieces on the board, you'll see that those squares are going to be very, very annoying for black to deal with. But okay, knight takes e8, it opens up the square f6 for the pawn, so there won't be any knight e5 being played. There we go, f6 has been played, a3. I'm not sure what the idea is of a3, but perhaps preparing some b4, or maybe he wants to move the queen, and the queen will not be able to go to b4 here. All right, knight c5. Bishop goes back to c8. Really doesn't want to lose that bishop, but honestly, I think I want to lose that bishop. Knight d6, queen f4. And white is slowly but surely preparing a kingside attack. I wouldn't be surprised if we're gonna see h4, g5 being played here. And yeah, it's not that difficult for black to defend, but I would say it's not the best position to be in. Absolutely. Yeah, black is spending some time. Yeah, what do you do here? Because if you play a move like 97, there's 96, or you allow white to access a bunch of squares, which you don't want to happen. If you play g6, you just weaken your king automatically. And then playing a5 is one of the possibilities, but you gotta be careful, because if you push pawns, they can't go back. That is the difficult part of pawns, you know? It's very easy to push them, but you'll regret it later that, you know, this square became really vulnerable or that pawn became really vulnerable because of this move. So yeah, gotta be really, really careful with those pawn pushes. Eventually, black went for knight d7, and white is like, okay, you want to take my knight? Go for it. Go for it. I'm happy to take it, because after b takes c5, I'll have a really nice pawn structure, and your pawn on b7 will not be happy. So knight goes back to f8, and it's clear that black is just clueless here. It's really difficult to find moves here. If you make one move, you'll just make a mistake, most likely. So it's better to just go back and forth and just allow your opponent to make the decisions and find a way to actually defeat you, because it's not that simple. All right, let's have a look at another game. I feel like this one is gonna take some time, or we will see a quick draw happen. Let's see how Vishnu Prasanna is playing against Mishanik. Okay, we see another position where the knight is really active, but we see a material imbalance here, actually. The knight has been traded for, I believe, 4 pawns. It's actually crazy. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 pawns. I miscalculated. I thought the +1 meant for white. 2 pawns, 2 pawns. Is that enough? Are the 2 pawns enough? White does have a nice position, but because of the fact that the pawns are not able to push, I'm not sure where their compensation is. You do have long-term compensation if you can keep this position together and manage to find a way to push those pawns. Like the pawn on d4 has potential, but other than that, I wouldn't be so sure about white's position here. White tried to start something on the g file, but obviously you just played g6 and that's it. That's all the attack you have. Goes for d5, but yeah, you can't go to d6, and knight d6 is actually also a really nice move to cover a bunch of squares, attack the pawn on b5. Queen takes f4 was played. And the beauty of this is that after e takes f4, rook takes e1, and there will basically be a trade because you go back with the queen. Let me demonstrate this for you guys. Rook takes e1, queen g1, and black will be left with a big advantage because not only did you take an extra pawn, you still have that extra piece left, and all the pawns will simply fade away sooner or later. So let's see who's still playing. I see Grishuk against Vitaly Bernatsky. What is happening here? Okay, we have minor pieces here in the endgame. Grishuk is up a pawn, but it's not so clear. It's not so clear because black's pieces are quite active. There are 2 pawns hanging over here. This pawn is also vulnerable though. So black goes for the pawn on b2 and then drops another knight to d3. Those knights, they have strengths, but they can also be very vulnerable. So it's kind of interesting to see such a position because the more pawns will disappear, the less chances you have to win whatsoever. So that's why black goes for this trade, but now black does have a passed pawn over here. So bishop b3 check drops the knight, and knight g3 check makes sure that this knight is well defended. Okay, that was very, very unfortunate for black because black had really good chances there. Maybe not for a win, but definitely to equalize the position and make a draw. But without the knight now, it's gonna be very, very difficult. And yeah, you would want to see like a trade that you can get rid of those pawns here on the king side, but I guess it's safe to say that it's impossible, and especially now that the knight has the second knight has been trapped. And Grishuk takes the win. All right. Let's go to another game. I was checking if we're still in round 2, and we are. Games are very, very tense. A lot of games are still in progress, so that's really amazing to see. And we have a checkmate on the board. This seems like also a tiny upset the black player with 2600 defeating a grandmaster with almost 2900 rating. I believe they had 2900 just before this game, but I'm not entirely sure. Let's see how Sergei Zigalko is playing. And oh, we see a flag just when we tune in. Okay. But it seems to be winning anyways, so. Let's have a look at this game. Adrikal Darren against Kobalia. Rook G. Ooh, was this supposed to happen? Was this supposed to happen because our rook f7 check and you lose that rook? Was that supposed to happen? I want to check a few moves back if we just missed a very big blunder. I don't think this was supposed to happen. Okay, we see resignation. Now let's have a look. Okay. Oh, it's so tempting to take that pawn whenever you can. But yeah, the problem here is, well, white thought obviously that after king takes, you just take that pawn with check. But instead, rook e7 was played, the very tricky move, trying to kick the king away from the g file. And after rook takes, you just simply lose that rook. So I believe white should have played something like rook f4, pick up that pawn with your rook and make sure that your king is in safety, because that was not the case after this move. All right, are we still in round 2? No, it looks like all the games have finished, so we're moving on to round 3, and we see that there's still a lot of players with 2 out of 2, but I believe that a lot of the favorites, a lot of the top players have drawn or lost their games in the first and second round, so a lot of surprises already. Let's have a look how Jan is doing. The game has started and we see the King's Gambit. That's not an opening you see every day. All right, bishop b5 check. Okay, we'd love to see this. So, well, the idea is here obviously that white is sacrificing the pawn over there. I'm sorry. But in return, white gets a lot of activity. And it's not that simple for black. It's not that simple to develop. Knight takes c6, and what do? You take and give away that pawn? I wouldn't be so sure, but I don't think rook e8 is the move, but I don't think black wants to play f takes e6 either. Let's see what black is planning to do. Black is spending quite some time here. Okay, they finally took on e6. Now, is Jan going to take on e6 with check? No, decides to take on c6 first and just leaves that pawn on e6. Wow. White is not interested in that pawn on e6. Instead goes for b3, trying to develop that bishop to b2. And are we going to see a long castle? I would actually be quite surprised if that happens, because it's not like you're very safe on the queen side. But then again, it's not that simple for black to attack there, because the pawns are very scattered over the board. And it's not that clear how you can actually attack here on either side. Okay, we see that black has spent already more than a minute here. Is already down to 1 minute and 30 seconds. Goes knight d5 and bishop b2. Now, do you want to trade those knights? I would say no. Okay, f3. F3 is a really nice move, actually. You know, one way or the other, you're gonna lose that pawn. And, well, actually, this pawn was pretty safe. I have to be honest with you. This pawn f4 is typically very vulnerable, but the one we saw right here was very, very well defended. So f3 is, despite the fact that that pawn f4 was really, really well placed, it does weaken a lot of things now, because after g takes f3, look how dangerous this is. Black played queen h4, king d1, and now black has a really nice attack going on, and the rooks are disconnected here on the white side. So that could give black a lot of chances here. Very interesting decision here from Anton Denchenko. All right, so Anton is still spending quite some time, and he will need to speed up because Jan has over 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and in this time control, that's gonna hurt a lot for Black here because you only have 1 second of increment, and your opponent can just go for the flag even. Despite the fact that you still have 1 second of increment, it's not gonna be a lot. If you are stuck in the middle game, you will struggle to find decent moves. Speaking from experience. And then again, where do you actually have the attack? Because, yeah, you can take that pawn, but see what Jan's idea is here. He played a3 so that the king can go all the way to a2, and now the rooks are connected. The rooks are happy together now. It's actually really instructive to see. He did not go for any sort of castle. Well, he wasn't able to because of the check. But despite having to play king d1, he found a way to bring his king to safety. So now knight e4 has been played, attacking that bishop and opening up this bishop on this diagonal. What are you going to do with it? Rook g1, attacking on g7, all right. Okay, rook f7 is defending that. It's very good. Queen takes c6. Yeah, this is a typical messy position that you do not want to be in because you have to figure out what to do in a couple of seconds. Imagine like you're spending time thinking about what to do while your opponent is thinking, right? And then suddenly something happens, like your opponent plays a move that you do not expect. Then it's really difficult to adjust to that and find a decent move. And you'll have to play what makes sense and what does not lose material in 1 or 2 moves. And it's really difficult to find that in just a few seconds. So we see that Black took the queen for Black sacrificed the queen for 2 rooks, but it's not so clear for who that's better. Now, knight g5 could be an idea. This is very, very complex. And once again, Black has only 1 second, so you gotta be really careful here and really fast. Rook f8, strengthening the position of the knight, but yeah, what do you do here? I mean, you have a passed pawn on h4, but you are not gonna be able to push that to h2 anymore, and you have another problem to deal with here on a6. And also, you cannot move that rook on f7, and there we see a flag. Yeah, that was just bound to happen. If you spend that much time early on in the game, you're gonna flag one way or the other at some point. Like, the position will be complicated. Like, your opponent will most likely not go for trades to make the position easier, right? So it was a really, really good way of dealing with this from White's perspective here. And the position was pretty complicated still. All right, so that was a pretty long game. Let's jump to another game. Let's go to Akobian against Shield 12. Both very strong players. What is happening here? I see 2 passes over here that look very dangerous, and I have a feeling that White has to go for the repetition here, simply for the fact that if you do anything else, one of the pawns will promote. And you don't have time to bring the knight into the game because you will just face queen f2 check, g1 queen. So for this reason, White went for the repetition, and Black had no choice but to accept this repetition, and it ended in the draw. All right, let's see how Grishuk is doing against Nick Lux. Nick Lux has internet problems, and that is very unfortunate because it was still an interesting position, not that lost yet. But Black does have the upper hand here. I'm curious if that's what Black or what White realized here, or if they just had poor internet issues here. All right, that's a win for Grishuk. Let's go to the next game. Rasmus Vane against Nkukito. I can't pronounce these usernames, but they're really nice usernames. I have to say that. E3? Oh. It's a very surprising move because now the rook goes to b8 and suddenly there is checks from behind, which you can't stop. Wow. Okay, that was an interesting twist there, because this seems to be very, very good for black over here. I believe f3 was the move here, simply for the fact that you're threatening checkmate, and I think one way or the other you'll have to push e3 at some point, but not like this. Not like this. This is not the way to win, and because of the rook b8 move. Your king will not be able to escape the checks. And if you manage to like trade rooks because you cover the check with your rook, then it's very simple for white to draw here, because the king is already at the square where it should be. Goes to f2. So, let's see. Okay, there's one more game going on. We see Bogus ZP against Lila Karitsa's streamer. Go check her out. She's probably streaming right now. Her channel is also Lila Karitsa, and it seems like she's going to win this game. Alright, she scores her first point, absolutely amazing, and it seems like the game was pretty long. It was 87 moves, and that was the last game of this round. We move on to round 4, which is the last round before the break. Let's see what we have here. We see that we still have a bunch of players here with 3 out of 3 still going for that first place. Even if you have made a draw already, you still have a chance to finish first, because most of the times the winner does not have a 100% score. So you definitely have chances, but you'll need to work a bit harder. All right. Which game should we look at? There's so many nice games. Let's have a look at Jaspin. We have not looked at Jaspin yet. He is one of the favorites very often in those type of tournaments against Dudaki. Okay, we are in, it looks like many openings, but I'm seeing here that the game started with the Sicilian that turned into an Alapin, and we are in quite a familiar pawn structure here. This almost looks like one that could be deriving from the Ruy Lopez. This could also, I wouldn't say it comes from the Pirc, but if you put the bishop on g7, you're very close to the Pirc, I would say. And there it goes. The typical idea here is, though, that you put the bishop, you play g6, put the bishop on g7, and perhaps go for some f5 pawn push in the future. But okay, for now, that's not really realistic, because there's a pawn covering that, the knight is covering that, as well as the bishop here on b1. So black goes for a pawn push on the queen side, gaining a lot of space there, and it's not so simple here for white to achieve something here. So bishop d3, allowing black to trade off that bishop, but do you want to trade that? I think that knight is pretty good. Typically you do want to trade off that knight squared bishop, because it could be very, very good for the attack, but there is not really an attack going on right now, especially not with that light squared bishop. But okay, black decides to take that. Very interesting decision. It's a close position, so you'd rather have knights hopping around the board, right? But yeah, perhaps black is thinking long term and wants to make use of the pair of bishops later. So yeah, what is black going to do? Knight c5 back. I was gonna say bishop takes c5, and I kind of like the power of the two knights over here. I do not see the strength of these two bishops yet. Queen b5 infiltrating in black's position, threatening to take the bishop, and the pawns are very well defended, but now, as you can see, like the queen is limited, has to defend the rook, as well the pawn on a5, the bishop has to defend the c5 pawn. Like, it's a bit shaky. And since we have a really nice square on c4, that's where this knight is aiming to go to. As well as the square f5, that's also something to consider. And g4, like there's so many squares for the knight. And that's why Jaspin was so sure of going for this. Plays f6, yeah. Moving the pawn like that, you know, it's good momentarily, but it weakens so many squares. For now, the bishops are defending all of those squares, but it's gonna be uncomfortable for black, to say the least. Okay, queen a6 and rook a8, they are all stacked on the a file. But yeah, how do you continue? So you want to play rook a3, but I believe you can just ignore that. Play d6, queen d5, check, d7, and just win. Just win the game. End it. No, but yeah, d6 looks crushing. Yeah, there you go, d6. And queen d5 check, queen f7, and that looks GG. Yeah. Black was not able to utilize the pair of bishops for the simple reason that the position is closed. And when white needs it, white plays d6. It doesn't even open up the position as much, but there's no way for black to open the position, to make use of the fact that there's something, some diagonal that has been opened. No, that's really, really difficult. Jaspem goes for knight c2, wants to play rook a1. Interesting idea. Is that queen trapped? The queen seems to be trapped, and black has to sacrifice here, I believe. It's not over yet for black, though. I mean, it's very easy to say, but white still needs to figure things out, because black is trying to like hold everything together. But okay, knight b6, it prepares d7, and yeah. That should have been it. That should have been it. It almost looked like black was able to build some fortress here, but because of the fact that this pawn is just pushing, there's no way for black to defend. Maybe if the king was a bit closer, it would have been really interesting. Because once again, the pair of bishops, they cover a lot of squares, right? So it could have been really interesting. But yeah, unfortunately for black, the pawn is pushing, and Jaspem won this game. Let's have a look. Let's jump to this game. Fair Chess on YouTube against Actor Zhu. Oh, it looks like oh, there's so many strong Chinese women players. I'm not sure which one of them this is, but it might be Zhu Wenjun. Let's see this game. So white is up a pawn here, but it's a rook endgame, and rook endgames are not so simple to win. So let's see if white can convert this, or if black can defend this. It's always really interesting. Like with rook endgames, it can go anywhere. Although the most likely result is still a draw. Even if you're winning, it can still end in the draw in the most unfortunate way possible. I've had first-hand experience with this, that your opponent suddenly has is able to move the rook around in such a way that if they lose the rook, it's a stalemate. So I had first-hand experience with that, and I can tell you that's no fun. So in any case, white is able to take that pawn on a6 as well. It's able to push that pawn now, but white also lost a pawn on e4, but it's not enough for black to find counterplay, because this king on g4, crazy enough, it is super safe, and rook takes g7, that was a move that the engine did not like. I would not be able to, I'm not too sure why, but I feel like it has to do with the fact that his king is on g4. And in one way or the other, like it's such a weird placement for that king. Rook c4 check. Yeah, you would say that it's really difficult now for white to continue, right? But rook g6, you're just gonna take those pawns. We don't care about the pawn a7. We just take the other pawns and create another passer and win like that. So I think somewhere with the way that the pieces have been moved. Oh, okay. I think somewhere like this idea that black is trying out right now should have been used one move, like with one move of a difference, like saving one move, because now the king was able to run away because the pawns on f6 and h6 disappeared. I think that was a really small difference. I think because black played rook c5, maybe rook a3 was saving a move there because the pawn was not able to push right away. But it is so difficult to understand this. And actually, I'm not even sure if rook a3 was a move, but I would be thinking about something like that. Maybe king e3 was the move to prepare the check immediately without wasting time of playing rook c5. Because after rook c5, a6 was played, and that gave white this one more move to win this game. Let's go to Sergei Zigalko, and Bortnik, that game ended actually in a draw. Let's see, who do we have here? Okay, we still have two very strong players. Once again, everyone, this tournament is Title Tuesday. Oh, it's the repetition. And only title players are able to participate. And it's always super beautiful to see how strong this field is. And I was gonna jump to the last game, which is this one, but we see a checkmate on the board. And this means that round 4 has ended. The players are going on a break, everybody, as well as the show. We have a bunch of players still on 4 out of 4. Everyone, almost everyone. A bunch of players have still a lot of chances to go for the first place. We'll be back in a few minutes with round 5 of the Title Tuesday early edition. See you in a little bit. Hello everyone and welcome back to the early edition of this week's Title Tuesday. We are moving on to round 5 of this event and we saw a lot of action already. We saw a lot of fires happening on the boards. Let's see what round 5 has to offer for us. We see that there's a lot of players still on 4 out of 4. I always love to see people having 100% score. It happens very rarely that a player finishes with a perfect score at the end of the event that is lasting 11 rounds. So let's see how board 1 is doing. We see Jasmine playing against Fair Chess on YouTube. It's a Sicilian defense, Alapin. And this looks really similar to what I love, being the French defense, everybody. We have a French defense structure here. What is really interesting to see is that the light squared bishop of white has disappeared. So it gives black less room to trade off that bishop. That is typically not considered a great piece. But here is being placed on a6 and it is covering a bunch of squares over here. It will definitely mess with white's development, so that's really nice. Let's see how black is going to make use of this. Are they able to push f6 one way or the other? I would say they would not want to push that pawn anytime soon because obviously for now the pawn e6 will be vulnerable and the rook is looking straight right into that pawn. So yeah, then you would want to think, okay, so are we going to see a castle here? From black's perspective, I would not expect the castle to happen. Well, actually, maybe we're gonna see short castle. Sometimes you do want to keep that king on e8 simply because it's much safer there than on the sides of the board. Because if you go short castle, look at this bishop. It is looking right towards that king side pawn on h6. The rook will be able to go to g3 and it is pretty easy for white to attack over there. So white goes for h5, making sure that the pawn structure here is set in stone. You do not want to play g6, obviously. And black decides to go for that castle. Now, I'm curious to see if white is able to make use of this. Goes knight h2, preparing knight g4, and I am expecting a sacrifice. That pawn, yes. That pawn is gonna be a target, 100%. I'm really curious to see if we're gonna see that sacrifice happen. Black goes king h8. It is one of those ideas that basically black is preparing to defend that king side one way or the other. And what I noticed, black is trying to trade off those queens really badly because with queen b5, he's basically preparing queen e2 and white will be forced to trade off the queens. That's why queen g4 has been played and black has to defend now. And now because the king moved to h8, you can play rook g8. And you're still holding on to your pieces here on the king side. You're still holding on. And yeah, what's next? What is white's idea now? Because that knight, you want to activate that. You want to put it on g4, but it messes around with your position. You're not really able to do this really easily. So let's see. What is white going to do? Knight e3. All right. Where is that knight going? Because you would expect to have at least some squares available for this knight, but well, maybe you have knight takes d5. That could be an interesting idea. It's not really threatening much. I mean, you're taking that pawn, but at the same time, black could also be like, hey, I'm gonna take your pawn, and then we'll trade our knights basically. Because if you take my knight, I'll take your knight. You know, so yeah, that's why knight takes d5 is not so efficient right now. Bishop d2. All right. Queen d3, that queen is going back and forth trying to find a way to trade off this queen. Because once black does that, once black is able to trade off those queens, then it will be much easier for black to play here. Goes queen e4 and yeah, you have to play queen h3 if you want to hold on to that queen. And I don't think that's what white is looking for here. White goes bishop b4 here. Yeah, if you trade those bishops, you will be left with those doubled pawns. But at the same time, this pawn on a4 will be very weak, and you'll have the idea of to play b3. So that's why Fair Chess did not go for that trade and goes bishop d8. And now this rook on f4, it's really stuck over here. Luckily for white, it's not really possible to attack this rook. If you play g5, you'll just face en passant, chat's favorite move. So yeah, there's no way for black to attack this rook. And how does white continue? Knight d1, it's not a move you want to play, but I can see what WIM is trying here. He probably wants to play knight c3, and he's trying to figure out a way to improve the position of these pieces, because yeah, there are decent spots over here, but they can definitely jump to better squares. So all right, now the knight goes to e1 as well. Well, that is a pretty position of the knights, but we do want to see them on more active squares. Is he gonna play knight c3 now is the question. The problem is bishop takes h5, so yeah, okay, yeah, I was gonna suggest maybe f3 is what you want to do if you want to hold on to that pawn, but he decides to sacrifice it in order to take that pawn on a4, but it does allow black to play knight g6 and has to give up on that exchange over here. So yeah, after all, that rook did get lost, and I'm not sure if white has some sort of compensation here, because yeah, it is pretty clear that black is winning here, but we have to give credit to this knight over here. This knight on d4 makes black's life really difficult. b4 has been played, so basically if the rook has to move now, and if you do that, then pawn on b5 will drop. And that's why we see the sacrifice over here. Wow, what a beautiful idea here of black, making sure that you have the better position here still, and making sure that you actually have this, well, I was gonna say the win, but it's not that clear. Rook e7, it's actually attacking the pawn on e6, and now it's actually not so clear for black. Suddenly white is taking all of those pawns, and it's not so clear. e6, rook e4, that pawn is really, really under attack now, and you cannot save that pawn. And suddenly we see, okay, we see 3 versus 2 over here, but it's not that simple. Like, I do not see how black can proceed here. Like king e4, but it's hard to book progress here. Okay, 6, rook d6, rook f6. All right, yeah. Wait a second. There was f3 check. There was f3 check. That was a hanging rook. That was a hanging rook missed by both players. Both players are speeding up because, well, WIM has only 2 seconds left, and he has this. Okay, well, he decided not to move and just resign because obviously it's lost for him. But what an opportunity he had right here, rook f5. And as we saw here, Fairchess realized instantly, I mean, he doesn't have many more moves, but he realized that f3 needs to be taken care of. That square is mine. But here, there was an opportunity to play f3 check here, and if the king moves, well, the king has to move, you'll just lose the rook. And thus the game. So that was a really big opportunity for WIM here. But as you can see, he has only 1.9 seconds, and that's not a lot. And he was, I'm pretty sure he was like in pre-move mode, maybe not pre-moving, but like hovering over piece and then dropping it as it turns to his move. So he doesn't spend too much time on his move. So he was in big time trouble there, which is why he wasn't able to make this move on time. And that is round 5, everybody. We're moving on to round 6. Let's see. So we still have, okay, we only have 3 people at the top. We have Fairchess on YouTube, we have Minlay, we have Jan Nepomniachtchi with 5 out of 5, and after that we see a lot of people with 4.5 out of 5, and those people are still in the race for that first prize, if not first prize, at least the top 5. So let's see what is happening in round 6. We see Fairchess on YouTube against Minlay. Really interesting opening. We see the Slav with an early b5. That's not what you see very often. And white is trying to ignore this. White is just playing b3, bishop d3, and saying, I'm fine if you take here. Imagine if this is gonna happen. Oh, that was a guess. That was a guess. We do not want to guess. We do not want to guess. Okay, I don't know how to guess this. Okay, there we go. Cancelled it. The idea is that if you take, then look at the pawn structure of black. It is terrible. That's absolutely terrible. So you do not want to do that just yet. A better idea could be that you want to play b4, and yeah, you're having a lot of space here on the queen side. The knight has to move. Maybe you make use of that square on e4, although it's really difficult. But at this point, do you maybe want to consider bishop takes f3? It's a very typical idea to like trade this knight for your bishop, and then opening up the king side so you can start an attack and everything else. But in this position, it's maybe not so clear, because if you take, this knight will jump to g3, there will be f4, like it may even be in white's favor, having a very active situation here in the center, with e4 on the side, so it's not so clear. It's not so clear, but maybe we'll see bishop takes f3 at a later stage. It might actually be forced after a move like h3. All right, knight g3. A typical idea here for black is also to push e5. Like it's either e5 or e4. You will see the one or the other, or both. That's also possible, but not very likely. But yeah, that is definitely an idea that you want to consider here. You may not be able to move it right away, but you can prepare it with rook e8, queen e7. Maybe you just take here and then go for e5. That is definitely an idea that I would consider. Taking and then e5. It's like someone's watching the stream, everybody. Yeah, so e5 has been played, bishop f5. And now this knight on d7 is pinned, but yeah, it doesn't do much damage yet. Not yet. But we could put it this way. It's not easy for black to put the pieces, coordinate the pieces. Let's put it that way. The knights are typically, once the bishop gets to f5, it's difficult for the knights to coordinate, and it's already like very difficult in those type of structures to develop your pieces well. And like if you compare white's pieces to black's pieces, it's obvious that we can say that, okay, white has the upper hand here. It's much easier for white to do something here. And as more pieces are being traded off, it is much easier for black to breathe in the position. And now actually, there's a pawn hanging over there. You have to defend that rook c1, exactly. Exactly. Maybe it's not so clear anymore. Maybe it's not so clear anymore. Once again, the knights are not the greatest over here, but it is becoming much easier for black to improve the position of the knights. You could consider playing knight f8, knight e6. But okay, white still has a bunch of ideas, one being f5, opening up the space for the rook to attack on the king side. But instead, fair chess goes with the king to f3. That's a very ambitious idea. Very ambitious. Black goes indeed with the knight to e6. Yeah. What's next? Do you want to trade? Do you want to trade that knight off, or do you want to keep it? Fair chess decides to go back with the rook to d1. Black needs to be careful of the knight on f6. Black needs to be careful because, the queen on b2 is pointing towards that king over there, and this knight was actually pinned for a second. Which is why wonderful time goes for d4, and now we see a trade on e6 happen, and it seems like white is getting out of this pretty well. But the king is quite vulnerable there. I have to admit, this king is not having a good time just yet. You might want to look out for moves like queen h3, attacking that pawn, queen g4 check. But okay, the king is still very safe there because you can always go back to g2. Well, not if there's queen h3, but you will not have such big problems after queen h3 if you defend that pawn. In any case, king goes back to g2 for the right reasons. It looks like a much better spot than f3. Rook d5. Attacking that pawn, actually. Are you gonna take that? Okay, goes for h5, trying to set up an attack on the king side, threatening h4, and also after that comes queen g4. So I'm liking where this is going for black, that is. I'm liking this attack. It may not be that good yet, but practically speaking, I think this is gonna be very, very good for black. So, okay, black is down to 15 seconds now, so that is not in black's favor. But let's see how white is gonna deal with this, because queen g4 and the h4 is a threat. You can easily stop this threat by playing either h2 or f3, but it will drop the pawn on f4. So let's see. What is Fairchess gonna do? What is he going to do? There's so many possibilities here, like rook d6, but if knight takes e4, there's f3. There's a lot of tactics in this position. Instead goes knight h7, goes for the safe way, basically. Queen d2, h4, f3, there it goes. And the queen has to go back. Oh, goes h3 check instead. Okay, I was gonna say the queen goes back to c8, but with h3, you allow the queen to go to h4 now. And yeah, the pawns are disappearing of black. So yeah, rook d8 is a nice move, but rook d6, and slowly but surely the position is becoming more clear. And it seems like white is gonna win this game pretty easily. Okay, maybe there's still some queen f4, but it should be easy to defend here for white, and in fact even win this position. If queen d2, there's always knight e2. After the check, there's knight e2, so oh, I meant that check. And knight h5, what a beautiful move, because, well, I mean, you're giving away the knight, but look how many pawns white is up. And after g takes h5, there's queen g3 check, and simply trading off the queens, and that's over. So very nice game of Dimitri Andreikin. Unfortunately, min lay goes down in this game, but Dimitri played a fantastic game. That was really, really well played. It was a really interesting one. Let's go to this game. GM Dmitry, another Dmitry, against Igrok. Okay, what is happening here? We see material imbalance. And it's not in black's favor because this queen is very powerful, and white has a bunch of pawns still that is able to promote with them. This pawn on a4, the other pawns have potential. But okay, black is still standing. It's not over until it's over. Queen c4 check. Okay, the bishop is defended though. The bishop is defended, so that makes things a bit easier for black. Okay, we see checks everywhere. Now the pawn g7 drops, but white does not care. White cares about that pawn promoting, but rook a5 stops the pawn. You cannot promote it whatsoever. Let's see. There should be a way for... was there maybe some queen c7 check when the king was on e5? I think there was. Because, okay, well, there goes your rook, yeah. Yeah, one way or the other, you're losing that rook. Because the king and the rook are so far away from each other, it's really difficult to defend both of them. So it makes a lot of sense that black was not able to hold on to that rook anymore. Let's see. There's one more game going on. Oh, it just ended. Just this second, it ended. And the game ended in a draw. All right. So that is round 6, everyone. We're moving on to round 7. And let's have a look at the scoreboard. We see 2 players on 6 out of 6. And, ooh, we have 4 players with 5.5 out of 6. Okay. So a lot of players have already lost at least half a point so far. So the hope of having a 100% score at the end of this tournament is becoming very being very narrowed, but hey, we still have chances. Let's see who is playing here. We have Jasper against Billy Kimba. We are in a Sicilian defense, but a closed one, and a very interesting one because it's pretty unusual. Bishop e5 check, knight d7, a4. This is not something you see every day. And black goes for a logical setup that is often being used in these type of closed Sicilians. A takes b6 en passant. At least we've seen that one today. Queen c1, rook e8. And what is happening here? So black has this weak pawn on a5, which is why knight e2 was played, opening up the bishop towards that pawn. And that's why black will go with a4, because, well, the pawn was under attack. And, well, knight g3. It seems like white is going to go for a kingside attack, and makes a lot of sense because the knights are on f3 and g3. Sooner or later, you can push that h-pawn, you can push Harry, and bishop h6 is a very typical move. Ideally, you would want to trade off those bishops because this bishop is a very good defender. But unfortunately for white, bishop h6 is met by bishop h8. So you will not be able to trade this bishop 100% for the simple reason that the rook is on e8. Usually it's on f8, and if it's on f8, then you cannot move that bishop from g7, right? So yeah, that's why bishop h6 was not forcing the trade. Instead, bishop c3 was played, which is really interesting. So instead of going for bishop h6, Jospin goes for bishop c3, and if h5, like if they can get rid of that knight one way or the other, then there will be a trade possible. So, and now e5, wow. Attacking in the center as well. And let's see, what can black do here? Can you play knight d5 over here? E takes d6 is not a fun move to face. So that's why black goes d takes e5, and I believe we're gonna see bishop takes e5. There we go. And queen b7 is attacking the knight on f3, but is there something here for white? I was gonna suggest maybe there's some queen g5 moves, like you can take and then maybe take there. Like there is some crazy things possible here, but okay, instead bishop e2 was played, very defensive, and it makes a lot of sense. You don't have to lose anything here. Knight d7. Yep, white can take it easy. I mean, white has a lot of space here, and they can attack at one point, you know, on the king side. It's not so clear yet how, but I'm having a lot of faith in those knights. I'm having a lot of faith in them, so yeah. All right, e5 was played. It closes down that bishop on c3 though, so it's not so simple anymore for white to attack. Knight is on f4 now, and you can take that, but it opens so many diagonals for this bishop, this other bishop. Like, it's not really ideal for white. And knight goes to d6. Wait a second. Whoa, where did that knight come from? Out of the blue, knight goes to d6, and suddenly there is an exchange hanging, and wow. That happened so quickly. I blinked and it was there, the knight on d6. And yeah, this seems like it's over. I don't see any sort of compensation here. I mean, obviously you can still try being exchanged down, but I do not see direct attack here on white. So yeah, this is really unfortunate for Billy. Let's see, they're spending quite some time on this move now, which makes a lot of sense because it happened out of the blue. Yeah. I hope they're not gonna run out, let their time run out. I hope they're not gonna do that. Okay, they're still thinking. Okay, they moved. They moved after all. They're down to 29 seconds, so they spent like over a minute or so on this move, which is quite a lot. And you actually need that time. You need that time a lot. Okay. That is, wait a second. Oh my god, it was worse. It was worse than just an exchange. The knight on f4 was also hanging, which is probably why they were spending so much time. Wow, I didn't even see that because after queen b6 takes, bishop takes f4, and the pawn can take back because the rook is hanging. That is a devastating result for Billy Kimba. Out of the blue, they lost a full rook, and suddenly it's over. Suddenly it's over. So Jospin goes through with 6 points now. We see on the leaderboard that Jan has won his game. He's on 7 out of 7. And behind him follows Dmitry from Germany with 6.5 points. Let's move on to the next game. We see Boven Rogel against Rasmus Veen. It's a derby, Germany derby. And yeah, what's happening here? Okay, we see 4v2 with the pawns. So this should be easily winning for whites. It should be easy to win, but it's a rook endgame, and it's not that clear. It's not so clear. Yeah, black is low on time though, but yeah, yeah, okay, you're losing that pawn. Okay, well, actually, you cannot really take that pawn because you'll lose this one, but it should be winning one way or the other, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful that you don't get into this position where you cannot move the pawns and you cannot get the king out of the checks of the black rook. So rook c6, preparing rook c5, and after takes, you'll be able to win that endgame with the pawns. So okay, king e6 is preparing rook f1 check now. King e4 and is preparing rook h6 check, and this should be easy winning. This should be easy to win now. All right. I'm expecting. Okay, well, I was gonna. Wait, what? Wait. Huh? Black has won? I was gonna move on to the next thing, but black has won because white resigned. Okay. Well, that is either a mouse slip or I don't know. That is, you do not see this every day. Okay. I guess that is a nice win from Rasmus Veen. Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm almost confident it's a mouse slip. It happens. There is a setting on Chesscom, if you haven't done it already. If you resign, you have this possibility of confirming the resignation, because I have been there myself. I've resigned out of the blue, and then I learned about a setting that you can confirm, like you allow yourself to confirm the resignation, because many of us mouse slip this. So it is very possible that it was a mouse slip. And a very fatal one, but it's very harsh. It's very, very harsh. Let's move on to the next game. All right, let's see what's happening here. Wonderful time against Dropstone. Interesting position. So it's basically knight versus bishop with the queens on the board and a bunch of pawns. Wait a minute. There was queen d7 and then checkmate. Ooh. But both players are super low on time, which is why they're playing so fast and not very accurately. And now, how do you stop that pawn on b2? Bishop e4 has been played, takes, and... Okay, he takes that pawn instead rather than taking the knight, because otherwise there was queen c1 check. And Min is fighting for that draw. He's fighting for the draw, because it's really, really difficult to try to swindle this. The queen is covering that knight, and you're not able to push the pawns whatsoever. So I'm sensing that there is gonna be well, I was gonna say there might be a draw here, but now that the black queen was able to activate, it's not so simple anymore. Let's see what they're gonna do. Let's just appreciate the time trouble. Min is doing a fantastic job keeping up that time and finding such moves like queen d1 check, making sure he's not losing that pawn h5, even though he's now losing that pawn. All right. Okay, queen f1 check. That is such a beautiful way to finish this game, because now this pawn endgame is easy to win. You would say easy, but then you'll face g4 and then g3 and it's stalemate. So you gotta be careful here still. h3, what a beautiful way to finish this game, because g takes h3 is met by g3 check, king h1, g2 check, and it's gonna be checkmate. And now they have to give up on that pawn, and this is winning as well. That was a stalemate. That was a stalemate if you're gonna play g3, so gotta be careful still. Now g2. G2, and that is a win. What a beautiful execution from Dropstone. Unfortunate loss for Min, but Black played this endgame really accurately and really, really well. Min was very close to the draw there. Let's move on to... Alright, we're moving on to round 8, everybody. All the games of round 7 have been finished. This is the last game before we move on to another break, the final break of this event. Let's have a look at the games. We see on board 1, Dmitry against Jan. This is gonna be a big decider for the first place because Jan is currently leading with 7 out of 7, and we have Dmitry following right behind Jan with 6.5 out of 7. So this is gonna be a really important game. Every single game is really important in this event, honestly, because if you lose one game, you're gonna have a difficult time catching up with the others. But it's not impossible. Definitely not impossible. Knight takes d4 because b5 is attacking 2 pieces at the same time, and that was the defender of that pawn. So black got rid of that pawn on c4. The pawn, bishop with the pawn. This pawn is just going to d3 all the way there. It's gonna go to c2 now. It was almost just like it was destined to go all the way to c2, but okay, it didn't make it to c2. This pawn structure is really interesting because there is the pawns are scattered all over the board, and I mean, white's pawns aren't much better, but I wouldn't be so sure who is better here because queen d7, now probably queen f3 is going to be played, but actually if you play queen f3, rook d8, it doesn't matter which rook, but I was gonna say the rook on a8 because this pawn is very vulnerable. You cannot really defend it because rook d1 was met by e4 or something. So yeah, do you take that pawn now? If you take that pawn, the queen takes f3, pawn takes f3, and more pawn problems, more problems. So rook c1 was played, attacking the pawn on c5, and you probably want to play c4, I would say, but if you play c4, what do you do after rook d1? Then suddenly your queen is dropped. What a sneaky way, what a sneaky way, because it's so obvious to play c4, but it's such a bad move, apparently. Instead goes for h6, preventing bishop g5, and obviously making luft for your king, really important. And so does white, so does white. It's very typical to see that happen right after each other, you know? Queen a6, attacking that pawn on a2. I feel like that's a really fair choice because, yeah, the queen is really well placed on d3, but maybe at this point we can say it's misplaced for the simple reason that it will be under attack after rook fd1, and you'll have to leave one day. The time situation is very equal, so that's really nice to see. Both players are in for a long game, I feel like, unless we're gonna see a huge blunder, but I'm not expecting that with the current time situation. Queen g3 is threatening bishop takes h6, and the king moved to h7 because of that, but it drops the pawn e5. Now, that was one pawn taken. There's gonna be so many pawns lost here. It's like almost all the pawns are hanging. Like the only pawns that are not hanging are this one, and we have these 3 that are not hanging. Those are the only ones that are safe and sound. The other pawns are all in danger. And it's super hard to see, like, which pawn do you want to take? Like, do you take c5? Do you take c7? Which one do you go for? Because if you take c7, then you lose b2. So that's why rook takes c5 was played. And after knight d7, what is after knight d7? Because that looks like a really tempting move to play. But after knight d7, there's queen d5. Queen d5. And you get out of that fork, you offer a queen trade, and after it takes, you save your rook. So that's why there's no knight d7. Yeah. Knight d7 anyways, queen d5, all right, and goes for the trade. So we are in an end game with 2 rooks, 2 pair of rooks, and bishop versus knight. Now, I would give the advantage to white here for the simple reason that the bishop is better in this situation. Why is this bishop better in this situation? Because the pawns are on two sides of the board, and that makes the bishop at least a bit stronger. Despite the fact that there is only one pawn here, there is some sort of advantage here for that bishop, but not a very big one, because you will need more pawns to make use of this advantage. And also, the knight was defending really well over there on the queen side. The pawns are still like very behind. So yeah, we see the knight being traded for the bishop, and at the same time, it did fix a small problem in White's pawn structure. Now, king f2 was played, allowing rook d2 check, being like, okay, you can take that pawn, perfectly fine, I'll take yours. We see the pawn being taken anyway, pawn a7 dropped, as well as c7 will drop soon. Will we see rook d2? Rook d2 is a typical move, like stacking on the second rank to attack the king over here and take most of the pawns, but since the king is out of this corner, usually it's on g1, now it's out to e4, it's not as powerful as it usually is, because now the king can just walk around. You gotta be careful though, but I don't see any danger happening here. I would probably see a lot of danger in my own game, but those players know what they're doing. They're super used to these type of positions. This is nothing to them. This is nothing for them. Are we gonna see f6? Yeah. We're gonna see f6, but I think we're also going to see a draw because, well, we are left with h pawns, and that is a draw. There's no way to win this unless you move the king all the way to the side, then that's how you lose, but yeah. Okay. We see a draw over here, so that means, everyone, we do not have someone with 100% score anymore. We do not have them anymore, but it's all right. Jan is leading with 7.5 out of 8 so far. Let's see what the other players, participants are doing right now. We see that Dmitry Andreikin has a really nice queen side going on here. The pawns on a5 and b6 are super far pushed, and the only thing that White should worry about is the king situation, because once queen d1, queen g4, rook d2 happens, you'll be checkmated. So that is the only thing that White should be careful of, which is why they play rook c7, because now if the queen leaves from here, your g7 bishop will drop. So that's why I like rook c7. Queen a1 is a really interesting move, and look at that. Rather than pushing that pawn and, actually getting checkmated, they trade all the pieces on g7, and the pawn was unstoppable. And there goes the rook. Wow. What a really beautiful tactic. Let me go back to that for a second, because it happened so quickly. So here there's a checkmate. Well, actually, that's not a checkmate threat. Here on f1, there's a checkmate threat. And after king h2, there was going to be rook d2, and that looked really dangerous. So that's why rook takes g7, queen takes g7, queen takes, king takes, and b7, and there's no way for you to stop that pawn. I mean, you can go rook d8, but then the other pawn will join, and you cannot stop both of them. So that was a really beautiful way of winning this game. Dmitry Andreikin joins the, I was gonna say lead, but okay, well, the top 5 with 7 points out of 8. There's still a bunch of games going on here. This one was won by Black? Oh, that's unlucky. White got flagged here. That is really unlucky. Yeah, I'm telling you, this time control is not ideal. I mean, it's really fun, it's really nice, but it allows flagging situations still. Despite it being an increment, it's not enough. And we are in for a ride, everybody. We have arrived at the rook versus rook station, all aboard, because we are in for a ride here of 50 moves. Black is simply refusing to take the rook, multiple times being offered that trade. And okay. I was ready to sit down here for a couple of minutes to appreciate the rook versus rook, but after at least 5 trade offers from White, Black decided to go for it. All right, let's check another game. Whoa. Oh no. There goes a fourth knight. Well, we have another adventure here, everyone. We see 4 knights on the board. I believe chess starts with 2 knights each side, so something incredible happened here, but let's see where the checkmate is. Ah, knight of 6 is a typical stalemate. Well, unfortunately, it didn't happen. Okay, so the idea here is basically that you're gonna take away those squares one by one without making it a stalemate. So knights are jumping, joining the attack. It's actually like we actually have to appreciate the fact that the king has been taken away. All of the squares, just like this synergy of the knights is actually super scary. And now checkmate. Okay, GG, beautiful. I'm really happy that I have witnessed that moment. And on this note, everybody, we are going to a short break. The players are gonna have a little bit of rest. We see that Jan is leading with 7.5 points once again. We'll be back after a short break with round 9 of the early edition of this week's Title Tuesday. See you in a little bit, everyone. All right, everyone, we are back with round 9 of the early edition of this week's Title Tuesday. We have seen a lot of excitement today already. We saw a couple of flags, we saw a couple of crazy positions, as well as this masterwork that we've seen with the checkmate of 4 knights. On the scoreboard, on the leaderboard, we see that Jan is leading with 7.5 out of 8, and we see that 4 people are behind him with 7 points out of 8, and there is a bunch of people behind that with 6.5 and 6 points, and they still have a chance to finish in the top 5. So let's have a look. The games have started. Let's go to the first board, Jan versus Shield 12. Let's see what we're in here. We see a trade on e5. Interesting. So this started as a Sicilian opening, and such an early trade in the center is quite unusual. I think it has to do with the fact that e5 was played. So let's see what Jan has in mind, because he is spending quite some time now. I think he's quite surprised with the decision here of taking on e5. What is happening here? Because if you take, pawn takes, I believe there is a move like h6, and funnily enough, it's fine for black. Funnily enough, it's fine. Really interesting. So Jan spent, okay, almost a minute on this move. Queen e1 has been played, opening up the rook to attack the queen, and now f takes e5 has been played, and black will be able to play knight d5 if they want to. They probably should. You can also play knight d7 to attack that pawn on e5. But I like knight d5 because it's much more active. But okay, knight d7 has been played, attacking that pawn on e5. And perhaps, yeah, rook c8 is a nice move to strengthen the attack on the c file. And you could be playing b4 any moment, pretty much. So the king stays in the center for quite some time. The danger here is that if you decide to go short castle, like this bishop is super strong on this diagonal, so you probably do not want to castle at all here with black. It's probably better to just stay in the center, because typically you should be afraid of like pawn pushes that are gonna open up the position one way or the other. But in this position, there's not a single pawn that can like do anything here in the center. There's only the pawn e5 which cannot move, and despite the fact that there are some files that have been opened, it's really difficult for white to make use of this. So b4 has been played now, knight goes to e2, and I think we're going to see knight d4 being played sometime soon. The bishop has been taken by black here on d3, which makes a lot of sense because the light squared bishop is pretty strong. Rook takes d3. And yeah, bishop e4 looks interesting, but it's really easy to defend this pawn on c2 by playing rook d2. But yeah, so far so good. I like black's position, but it's not like it's winning or anything. Like this bishop is still stuck on tied up to that pawn on g7. Yeah, I wouldn't be so sure how to deal with this position with both sides, because on one way you could say like, okay, black has a really nice attack going on that c pawn, but on the other hand, you have a problem. You have a problem, and the problem is called a king that has not been castled. The king is in the center of the board, in the middle of the board, that is, and yeah, it's not gonna be an easy time, but then again, it's not easy for white to make use of this just yet. All right, let's quickly jump to another game because there's a lot of interesting games going on. Let me jump to this game right here. We see Dropstone versus Fair Chess on YouTube. What is happening here? So white is up in exchange, but look at this pawn structure plus pawn. Okay, it's not really that big of a problem, but it is a very big pawn over here. You can go to e2, but you lose the pawn e4, and like it feels like black is still holding on to this position. It's not as bad as it seems like. This knight on c5 is pretty strong. There's not a single pawn that can attack this knight. It's gonna be very difficult for the rooks to attack that knight and get rid of it. So far, black is holding on, but it's obviously not a position you want to be in. It's not winning or anything, but I do see drawing chances here for black. I do see draw potential here. The king is actually on a run here. That's why rook goes to b1 to stop that run from happening. Rook goes to d8 now. Yeah, I think it's best if black decides to just stand, just do nothing crazy, and let white do the thing. Do it. Let's give them the opportunity to try anything, because what can you try? The best you can try is probably something like g4 with king f3. But even then, like king f3 drops the pawn on h3. If you play g4, you'll just lose the pawn right away. So, okay, so white goes rook b6 now. Yeah. It's so funny to see, like, how difficult it is for white to do anything here. And, okay, black is ambitious, goes for bishop takes c4 because, well, the bishop is pinned. If you take the rook. So, and also black is, I'm sorry, white is down on time, down to 13 seconds now. That is really, really uncomfortable. That's really unpleasant for white. Plays king f3. I see g4 happen sooner or later. Probably soon, because I don't really see what else you can do. Perhaps you can also play bishop e2, but yeah. It's not so simple. Like, these two pieces are pretty strong. They're pretty well placed. Rook b1, it drops the pawn on c2 basically. Do you take with the knight or the bishop? I wouldn't know. I think with the bishop is what I would have done as well, because this knight, oh, sacrifices the exchange back. And it makes a lot of sense because white is aiming to take all of the pawns here on the king side and then push the pawns here on the king side. So it makes a lot of sense that they went for this. And how does black deal with this? Rook a3 is a good move because you want to take that pawn. You want to have something back. But yeah, it's all gonna be like, you know, is this pawn gonna be able to promote before white has chance of promoting themselves, or how's it gonna be like? And now the idea here was rook f7, obviously taking that pawn, but after rook a1 with the king on f3, if you take on f6, rook f1 check and you lose the rook on f6. So that was not possible, which is why king g2 was played. King b4 is now going, going aside to allow the pawn to push, but in any case, you can also consider going to d3 and catch those pawns on e3 and e4. So let's see what's happening here. Are we gonna see some fireworks happening here still, or are we gonna see a dead draw without anything? Is there anything in this position here for either side? Because it's super tense here with the pawns on the sides being so far ahead already, especially this one. The one on a3 is really scary. Rook b8 check probably, and where do you put the king? Because you do want to push this pawn in one day. King f3 allows rook g1 and you just drop the pawn. Ouch! That's a very expensive pawn. It's a very expensive pawn, but it's still really difficult to do anything here because, oh no, white flagged in this position, and I was gonna say this is pretty easy to draw because anytime this rook will move, you'll have this check. So right now, rook h1 check with a super simple move to play rook b1. You just go back and forth, and whenever the rook decides to move, you give another check. And if the rook goes here, I believe there's even rook c2 if you want to do that. Or actually, yeah, there's king b1 and you lose that. So I think king b3 is the move. King b3, king b1. You can either take or give it, well, you give a check and then take. But yeah, this is not the way. You just have to accept the draw. And whenever the rook moves elsewhere, like on the b file, you give a check and the rook has to go back. So that is a very unfortunate loss for Dropstone. The time is such a pain. Let's move on to another game. We see Elamir against Erik Rosen. This is a very, very drawn endgame. I expect this to be a draw very soon. I don't know how many moves they have been playing without a pawn push or capture, but it seems like it's been a long time. So I'm expecting a... Oh, no! Oh, no! Oh, no! Wait, wait, who initiated this? Wait a second. Oh my god, rook c8. Oh. I mean, I've been in this situation where I would mouse slip, accidentally do something like this, but I can see the situation being that white just tried to be dirty. So, well, I'm not sure how many moves were left till the 50 move rule. So let me see. G6 was played on move 77 and the game ended on move 113. We were really close to that 50 move rule, and then that's when they decided to end it like this. Well, that is really unfortunate for Eric, but I guess well done. Nice win, Elamir. Nice win. All right, that was round 9, everyone. We were moving on to round 10, and we still have 2 players leading. Fair Chess on YouTube joined Jan into leading the tournament, but there's still 2 rounds left. So anything can happen. Let's see. Let's have a look at this game. So Jaspim is playing as Aryan Tari. Both players have 7 points, so they I believe they have a chance to finish in the top 5. Definitely. So they're definitely playing for one of the prizes here. Let's see what opening they chose for. They chose for the Royal Lopez with a trade on e3, which is pretty surprising because typically this is good for white, as in you'll have the open f file, you'll have a nice center, and after d5 you can consider taking, takes, and play e4 if you want to. But on the other hand, if you go for this line after takes, e4, there will be knight f4 possibilities for your opponent. So it has its drawbacks, but so far I like how white is playing, just developing, activating the rook to d1. So after d takes e4, they would want to play d takes e4, I believe. Opening up the rook, and it's not such a bad thing to have doubled pawns in the center because, you know, you might see them as weaknesses, but they can also be actual strengths because this pawn here is covering the d4 square as well as f4, and guess which knight wants to go badly to that square? And typically you also have knight h5, knight f4, so not a single knight can enter that square at all. So queen g3 has been played now, attacking that pawn on e5, but queen b6 counters this because the pawn on e3 will be hanging. So after knight takes, queen takes, there will be queen takes e3 check. So what is white gonna... How is white gonna respond to this? Is there gonna be some d4, which drops the e4 pawn, but it does allow for some complications in this position? It's really interesting because it's a very dynamic position. There's a lot of tens in the center, and it's not so clear how you deal with that. King h1 has been played, allowing queen takes e3. White is like, I do not mind you taking my pawn. Show me what you got. Yeah, I'm curious to see what their response is after queen takes e3, and if black is even gonna decide to take on e3. Aryan is taking his time right now, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you would say it's a typical position in the Roy Lopez, but I would say it's quite unusual to have this center going on here for the longest time, with a bunch of pawns hanging. And he decides to go for rook a e8, and that pawn is defended one way or the other like that. C takes d5, e takes d5, c takes d5. Let's see, is he gonna decide to play d4 maybe? Because, well, this pawn is still hanging. It may not be free, but I see it as a free pawn. Rook e1 has been played defending that pawn after all. Chesscom is postponing the pawn push because if you push a pawn, then yeah, you'll be making other squares really vulnerable. Queen d8, all right. Yeah, so black is trying to start an attack on the king side, but as you can see, this knight is covering all the important squares, and this pawn is covering the square on f4 only to move forward. All right, never mind about that. The pawn goes to e4, but you can push the put the knight on e2 now, and well, okay, bishop takes e6. That's a really surprising move. I'm seeing a lot of counterplay here for black, definitely. Now with the knight able to go to f4, like I see some chances here. I'm liking black's position here much more, simply for the fact that they have so much space now. The pawns on e5 and d4 are super, super strong. And the pawn e6 joined the party in the center. And yeah, I like the knights here much more. I can definitely see a knight move to f4 happening sometime soon. No rush though, but yeah, it's definitely an idea that's gonna be played very soon. c3, trying to eliminate the pawn structure in the center, makes a lot of sense. After queen takes b2, you'll be able to take on d4, and then at least one pawn drops over here. If you take back, obviously you can take that back. Very interesting position. It's not so simple what's happening here. It's not very simple. And this queen on g1 is pretty oddly played, so you might want to consider trading that. I think Chesscom will go for queen takes d... Oh, he doesn't. He goes for knight takes d4, just keeping that queen on g1 as a very defensive piece, because now there is a checkmate threat if it wasn't for the queen defending that. So the queen is very important over here for the time being, but you might want to consider moving the queen around and activate it. Queen c3 is played now. Rook d1 defends that pawn, but I believe it's just, well, I was gonna say it's just hanging, but knight d3, rook c2, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Queen e3 has been played, and you can play knight f4, but it's typically like a really nice way to defend things. But g3, that's gonna hurt a lot. Rook c8 has been played. Is there maybe some capture in knight b5 to win that piece? Or you can just take it. You can just take it. There's no need to play knight b5. You can just take it for free. Wow, what a surprising sequence of moves we've seen here. And suddenly white has won the game. Wow. Seems like black underestimated this position. Or simply didn't see how to take care of it. Actually, it's not so simple because the knight is... Well, the knight is pinned. So perhaps there was something with the knight going to f4, and maybe there was some tactic there with e5. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure. But suddenly black got into huge troubles, and Chesscom was able to make use of this. So Chesscom moves on to the top. We still have a game going on here. Fair Chess on YouTube against Mishanik. Really important game as we tune in. There is a rook being dropped. So that is a really, really important win for Fair Chess. We still have wonderful time playing against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and it seems like Jan is winning this game as well, which means that he will be leading the tournament together with Fair Chess on YouTube. Wow. All right, so let's see who's next. We still have a bunch of games being played. Let's have a look. We see Fenderin against Grandelicious. Really, really funny username. We see another rook end game, but in this one, it's not so clear how you can push that pawn. Yeah, rook g6, h6 might be the way. But if you move the king, you'll lose a pawn on f5. Okay, so the rook goes behind now. Is that enough to book progress, to make progress here in this game? Ooh, h7, and how do you defend that? Yeah, king g7. And that's over. I'm expecting resignation. There we go. Okay, so wow. So white was able to convert that to win. It was not so easy. It's not so easy. There's 2 more games going on here. We have Rasmus Vane against Bardia Daneshvar. So let's see. There is a material imbalance here. But you would say that white is winning here, right? But no, it's impossible to break through here. You need more pieces to progress here, but that's not possible here. If you move the king, you'll lose because of the pawn promoting here. And you actually got to be careful. If you play too aggressive here, you might lose because the pawns are very, very strong. G4, training that last pawn of white, and this should be easy to draw. Very easy. You just hold on to that bishop and the pawns will just stay there. I mean, unless you decide to play e2 out of the blue, which is definitely not gonna happen. Yeah, so this should be an easy draw. Okay, the king goes out of the box. Okay. I sincerely hope we're not gonna see too aggressive plays here, because that will mean that one or the other blundered. Or a flag. That would even be more devastating, because this is quite an obvious draw. There's just no way for either side to win here. Okay, the king goes to f5. Pawn goes to d3. Okay, the king returns. Oh. Okay, so white got rid of one pawn, but okay, still not really big progress here. The bishop just goes back and forth on this diagonal, and even on g5, the bishop was safe. The bishop was safe there, because if the rook would have taken, the pawn promotes. So the rook is stuck on the first rank, and ooh. Okay, this is why you should be careful. Rook bishop e1, and the rook was cut off, but yeah, there's no way for white to checkmate here. The king is tied to that pawn. Whenever it leaves, the pawn promotes. So this is a very easy draw. Yeah, let's see if there's another game going on. Otherwise, okay, this is the last game. So we're just waiting for this game to finish before we are moving on to the last round. The last round. Okay, they're still trying. I mean, we've already had a pawn move, so we're in for a long ride. We're already on move 147. We haven't even, I think we've done like 20 moves now. Maybe not even 20, but yeah, this should be a draw at some point. I sincerely hope we're not gonna see a flag. That would be devastating. That would be quite devastating. King c3 is a way to lose, everyone. King c3. I'm just saying, like, it could happen. It could happen. I'm pretty sure we've all had a situation like that happen to us, you know? A clear draw, and then it's gone. Your draw is gone. You gotta earn that draw sometimes. Whoa. Wow, okay. I was expecting to wait for another 5 minutes, you know? But we have reached the 50 move rule, everyone. We have reached the 50 move rule, which means we are moving on to round 11, and we have 2 players on 9 out of 10. They're fighting for the first place. In case both players lose, there are still players that haven't, I mean, I was gonna say they have a chance to win, but because of tie breaks, the chances are very slim. So I would say that the players, at least like the ones below the top 2, have a chance to tie first, but that does not change anything for the prizes, obviously. So in any case, we have 2 players on 9 out of 10, and behind that group of players, we have 4 players with 8 out of 10. So they're definitely still fighting for the prizes, as the prizes are for top 5. So let's see what's happening in the last round, everyone. We see here Dimitri against Fair Chess on YouTube. We've seen the Alapin. I haven't seen the Alapin in the longest time, only to see it today a couple of times already. So seems like a very favorable opening by the grandmasters, the players. Let's see. So in this situation, what is happening exactly? White has a lot of space, but because it's one of the reasons is because d5 was not played yet by black, and I don't see it happen anytime soon either. Because if you play d5, you also weaken the square e5, and you might not want to deal with that. This knight on b4, typically it goes to d5, but that's not accessible for black right now. Maybe we're gonna see knight c4. There we go. Knight c4 takes, very typical. And now you wanna go to c2, but after rook c1, you're kind of stuck there. So knight d3 instead, attacking that bishop. And once again, you are gonna be stuck there, so you need to have a backup plan or an idea of what you are going to do next, because if you don't have a follow-up, you might get trapped, you know, rook d1, queen e2, and your knight will be under attack. So I believe queen b6 is a move to deal with this. Queen d7 has been played instead. Yeah, this seems like a very interesting position still. I'm expecting this game to last a bit longer, so let's quickly jump to the game of Jan versus Chesscom, without the layout messing up, obviously. Oh, we see another King's Gambit. Jan woke up and chose violence, everyone. King's Gambit today played at least 2 times. And what a complicated position we're looking at. The pawns on f4 and g4. It's like, it's almost like Buckhouse. You just drop the pawns and yeah, deal with it. And wait a minute, Chesscom is spending a lot of time here. He's down to 40 seconds already, while Jan has 2.5 minutes on the clock. That is a very devastating time difference, and that's gonna hurt a lot later on. So he decided to take on c6, first on d2, I believe, and then on c6. Rook e1 check. This is a very, very strange position. He cannot take on f4 because checkmate. Queen takes c2. So that's why this pawn is like alive, surviving. Rook e5, attacking that bishop. I guess you want to go, well, if you go back h5. Ugh. This is not a nice position to be in. If the bishop goes anywhere else, well, bishop e6 drops the piece with d5 as well. Actually, you might be able to survive this still because queen d6, but in any case, the pawn drops. Other pawn is not gonna drop soon, but maybe one way sometime later. Rook e8. Oh, bishop b5, and the position is just collapsing here. Black's position is collapsing. The king is extremely vulnerable. This pawn is not having the greatest time, and it's really, really difficult for black to defend here. Not to forget that black is down to 9 seconds. It gets 2 minutes. Like, it's not like it's 9 versus 9 seconds, right? It is 9 seconds versus 2 minutes, and that is a very big difference. Jan can just take his time here and find the right moves to win the game. King's Gambit OP. Yes, take your notes, everyone. Try it out. I personally would not recommend it as the main opening, but I will definitely recommend it to give it a try and see if it maybe suits your style. You know, who knows? But it's one of those openings that is typically not recommended to use at home. All right, so queen takes h4. So what is happening here? We see that white has 4 pawns, black has 3 pawns, but those pawns, they should be stronger. But the problem is they need to push. You know, if you have pawns, you need to push them. So these pawns are much more pushed, you know. So if there's going to be like a trade happening, for example, bishop e5, king f8, and there's going to be a trade on e8, this pawn will be much stronger because it's already pushed ahead and gonna be promoted quicker. But for now, for the time being, there's not a move like h4 possible because the pawn g4 is simply hanging. So I'm not sure if it's that simple to win for either side because, well, I feel like 3 results are possible here at this point for the simple reason that it is quite complicated and the engine is really favoring white here, but I would say it's not that simple. But okay, we have to remember that black is down on time by a lot. And there goes the knight and yeah, bishop, sorry, bishop. I thought it was a knight, it was a bishop. And yeah, it's gonna be checkmate soon, I think. I'm not sure where because the pawn here is promoting, but you can give checks as much as you want and stop the pawn from promoting at least. Yeah, where's the checkmate? I mean, you can play queen h3, but the king will go there. You cannot take that pawn, so where is the checkmate? You cannot even give a check here because then, I mean, you can give a check, but the pawn will promote at some point. I'm out of words. What is happening? There is no checkmate on the board. What was that evil bar jump? And suddenly checkmate. It's checkmate. It is checkmate on the board. What a crazy moment we saw there. Wait a second. The evil bar jumped there for a second because it looked like black had an opportunity here. King h4 and bishop f5 was a bit slow, but what could black have done better here? It's not so clear. Maybe stalemate. Stalemate. Whatever you do, it's stalemate. Oh, what a missed opportunity. This is so typical. Like, black was obviously trying to promote that queen, but white is trying to checkmate. And with that one silent move, bishop f5, you're boxing that king, which is exactly what you wanted. But it does allow black to go for a stalemate tactic like this. And it's so unfortunate for Jasmine that he missed this. But it means that Jan has won the game and is tying first with Fair Chess on YouTube for the first place. So congratulations to both players for this fantastic result. Title Choose is not over yet because we still have a bunch of games going on. So let's have a look at those. We see that Bogdan Diac is playing as Manchuk. And we're gonna see a ladder here. We're gonna see a ladder here. King there. Wait, oh, the king is too close for a ladder. The king is too close for a ladder. And okay, in the end, the pawn promotes. Okay, that was a tricky moment there. That was a tricky moment there. Because typically you want to go for a ladder here, but you got to be careful that the king might be too close. All right, it was winning all the way. I was seeing an evil bar jump, but the evil bar was indecisive. Okay, this should be a win for thumbs down. Pardon my words, this is not a win anymore. That is not a win anymore, and that is the end of this week's early edition of Title Tuesday. What an anticlimactic end, everyone. What an anticlimactic win. Congratulations to the winners. We have, let's have a look at the standings, everyone. We see over here that Jan Nepomniachtchi has won this week's early edition of Title Tuesday. He wins $1,000. Congratulations. Fair Chess on YouTube, second place. Tied first, though, with a fantastic result of 10 points out of 11. We have Missionik finishing third on tie breaks with 8.5 points out of 11. And we have Dropstone being fourth, Indian Lad finishing fifth. We have not seen Indian Lad's games, I believe. So seems like they made a big comeback in the last couple of rounds. And here you see all the other participants of this week's early edition of Title Tuesday. Well, that brings us to the end, everybody. I would like to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fireworks. It was incredible. And later today, we will have the late edition of Title Tuesday. So make sure to be there in the evening. Well, in the very late evening, my time that is. In a couple of hours from now, we will have another show right here. on chess.com. So make sure to be there. Also, make sure to follow me on my Twitch channel. My username is Anna-Maja. You can see it in the chat. And I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and see you next time.